Hello, welcome to Celluloid Consomme. This is my first video interview with a writer and filmmaker who sad to say, I've just discovered the film that we're about to talk about here, and that is Suburban Sasquatch, which was released on DVD in the early 2000s and now is getting a very exciting Blu-ray release from Wild Eye Releasing's label Visual Vengeance.
Suburban Nature Park.
Let's go outside and play. I'm ready.
Who's coming to get you?
Bigfoot.
Sasquatch! Bigfoot!
First of all, I'd just like to welcome you, Dave. Dave Wascavage, writer and director of Suburban Sasquatch, among other films.
Hey, Andre. Thanks for having me come on and chat.
Yeah, of course. First and foremost, this is a Bigfoot movie. So it seems that you're pretty much a fan of like cryptids, monsters, like from all those old school 40s through 50s creature features. Is it fair to say that that was mainly like the inspiration for this?
Oh, no doubt. You hit the nail on the head there. So when I wrote this film in 2003, I just finished getting Fungicide completed. That was my first full-length film. And I was thinking, well, with the amount of time it takes, the amount of money, if I'm only going to be able to do one or two more films, it has to be Bigfoot and then zombies. Like anything else would be like icing on the cake, so to speak. But those are my primary interests. But Bigfoot really came out because huge fan of horror films from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. I mean, just absolutely in love with all the what are now called B and cult movies. But to me, as a young child, it was like, wow, this is so real. Even if it wasn't, it was real. And then as I watched more and more films, and I'd say, man, how did they do that? Even if it was low budget, everybody still tried to make an effort, and it was still enjoyable. So really, it came about from the love of the genre or the type and love of cryptids. But also, Bigfoot has always been this fearful icon of the woods and the unknown to me. And digging into the lore and finding out how truly the native peoples here had so many names for him and so many ideologies based on it. I'm like, this is fantastic. I just absolutely loved it and wanted to dig in and make a story around him, that folklore, and something where he wasn't just somebody that, a creature that appeared and disappeared. There was actually something to him.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I think I love the most about Suburban Sasquatch is that he literally does just appear out of thin air. And if you go into this just thinking it's like, a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot movie, you're in for quite a few surprises. It's been talked about a lot on the internet, but I tend to not want to spoil it for any people out there who might not have seen it. And that's one of the things that Visual Vengeance is kind of doing is making these very little seen, rarely celebrated films into a much wider audience. You can say that about any of the other movies they put out, but Suburban Sasquatch especially, even though it has been on DVD, it's kind of not been too widely available, I don't think. But now, even more than ever, I would say.
Yeah, I got to say props to Wild Eye and to Visual Vengeance because they've been wonderful to work with to remaster this and get this out because the technology is available to make it a lot cleaner and better, graphically than it was when I originally made it. So they've been fantastic helping me along the way, getting this out to market. But you're right. When it was released in 2004 and it's gone through various distribution models in different countries, like believe it or not, it was a big seller in India for a few years and then in Russia. Like all various countries had it for different deals and it would see ups and downs. And then, recently, I think it was mostly Red Letter Media. They did a review of it like 2018 or 19, and that brought in a whole new generation. But all along, I had people over the years that would email me and watch it, and we would just discuss the film. So it's always had a following of sorts, but it's gotten these resurgences of interest, which has been fantastic. But yeah, it's wonderful to see it out in Blu-ray, and the artwork is phenomenal. They did a great job
The cover is, it's fantastic.
And that's how I would pick films. Like I'd go into, video stores and I'd be like, whoa, look at this cover. And I'd love the taglines for these films. You read a tagline, you're like, I have to see this. And then you're rarely disappointed. You're almost always going to find something you enjoy in these movies.
Yeah, that is definitely, it's almost back to like the video store days where you're browsing among the stacks and like you may have like heard of some movies and then you see titles that you've been meaning to see, but like, no, you're not going to rent them today. But then you look at this thing, you see the cover for, say, Suburban Sasquatch, and then obviously the cover will grab you, it will intrigue you, and that's probably all you need for you to take that videotape or that DVD and just bring it to the front and just run it.
And I have to be honest, when I make these films, I typically do everything. And it's not that I don't have a lack of people having an interest. It's just that I have a vision. I want to see it come to fruition. And when I was making the original poster, which is essentially just half of Bigfoot being seen with the red glowing eyes, I'm thinking, boy, it doesn't have the visual punch that you're referring to. So to see that Visual Vengeance has done this artwork is wonderful. I mean, they've represented the film, and honestly, I would have bought it because I'm a huge fan of Bigfoot, and I saw Bigfoot doing something like that. I wouldn't buy one copy. I'd buy 5 and give some to my friends before even watching it.
Yeah, it's like if you were if your memory was wiped and then you saw this on the shelf and had no idea that you wrote and directed it, you would probably pick it up and buy multiple copies for yourself.
And the funny thing about that too is like one of the efforts I tried to do when I was writing, shooting, and editing the film is I wanted to be able to watch it, and I wanted to pretend like I was in the audience. Like, how would I respond? And all the moments that I found to be serious or ridiculous or whatever are the same things I would have enjoyed if someone else had made the film. So I didn't try to make it a cult movie. I just tried to make it a movie with the exceptions that other people would make. And I would think, what are the beats that I'd want to hit that were similar, like in terms of feeling, impact, and at least have a story behind it. And I really tried my best to get that. So when people say to me like, oh, what about this scene that seems silly, or what about this that's funny, I'll be like, look, that was an honest mistake, or it was written to emote this way and it just didn't come across, but it ends up being maybe someone humorous, and that's okay.
Interesting. So did you structure the script like that, or it seems like there might have also been a little bit of room for improvisation for the actors and maybe for staging, because things change on the fly all the time, and like nothing can be like fully thought out like from the beginning.
I actually wrote 3 scripts. So I when I wrote the film, I realized it was too big, so I split it into 2 films. And then I realized the story was large enough for 3, and I thought, well, while I'm doing this, I don't want to write a sequel 20 years later and miss the emotion that I wanted to bring across in the full story. So I wrote three stories. So Suburban Sasquatch is the first, the second, and third one will get filmed eventually, but the intention all along was for the script to be followed very succinctly, because there were some parts in the dialogue that lend themselves to support the sequels. Okay. So I would say to the cast, sometimes I'd say, to your point, I'd say, this is something that we can be more flexible on, or, ad lib. And there's some points like, sorry, I know it sounds stiff, but I want that dialogue to be that way because it has a certain meaning. But you're right, you just have to let things flow. And there are times due to, constraints with the cast or timing or abilities, you just have to allow some things to go, and some things have to be cut for time or cut for interest. Editing can be a very difficult job, and I'm not going to say I'm very good at it, but no, the intention was never to create a cult movie and get it out there. It was a fully formed, baked concept of, we've got this Sasquatch that's representing the natural world embodied by some type of spiritual element, and this Native American woman who represents the real world with a spiritual element as well, and they're colliding. And there's a hint as to what's underneath them that's going to be explored later. But it was all intended to be this operatic large story that's fully set. So it doesn't hit it all the time, but it's sure enjoyable to watch. And you certainly see the characters go through a lot of change. And that was something that's important to me. I didn't want to bore anybody.
Oh, it's absolutely not boring at all, and I find the performances to be one of the strongest points of it. A lot of movies are on their weakest foot in the beginning when they're introducing their characters, unless they have something else there, like an early ace up their sleeve. And for you, you have that early ace up your sleeve of the rules and the laws of the creature that, and there's never really one of those like exposition dumps either. You discover it alongside like the main characters, and even with like the Native American woman, she kind of doles out information very carefully and methodically, but never all at once, just to like fill any sort of time. So it seems very like specifically meted out, and I would say like very well done, and I think it would reward many repeat viewings for you to identify like what the Sasquatch is doing at this point or that point before you would see it for the first time and kind of know what might be going on.
Thank you. I took I mean, in filmmaking, you want to make sure you don't give the audience the answer. You want them to be able to put it together.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to make it so intellectual where it's inescapable or the meaning has no context, but you want to give them enough where they can figure it out. So I took a page from George Romero, a page from Lucas, which is basically visually give us just enough information that you can deduce something, but you can have a subtext or something that is going on behind the scenes that when you think about it or watch repeated viewings, something becomes more clear. And in fact, to joke about this, I did the antithesis, because there was one scene where Tala was walking away from the reporter, and he's basically saying, so basically what's happening is this, and she's like, yep, that sums it up. That was kind of a joke that a lot of movies just basically give you a summary right there. They lay it out and it's not interesting. So I kind of put that as a little jab to say we're not doing that here, but it's kind of funny because in essence, that's where we are right now, halfway through the film or whatever the case is.
Yeah, that got a chuckle out of me, especially as like I think she was walking away from the onset mic at the time, and like you could kind of hear her drifting away, which I think added to it, like in a way that like couldn't have been like captured again. So
I gotta say, there's something funny about that too. Is when we shot that scene, it was in Westchester, Pennsylvania, and there had been a power outage recently. There was a storm that had passed through a few days earlier, and literally homes were without power for days. So I'm thinking, great, I'm not going to have any noise, but in the middle of that area of the woods, there are homes all around it, and they were all running generators.
Oh, right, of course.
There's all these home gas generators running, and suddenly in the background, when I was doing the audio editing, I'm like, all I hear is generators. Like, it was so hard to scrub. You can even hear it now, I'm sure. It's like really tough to get that clean.
I hadn't noticed it on my first watch, but I mean, like I'll keep that in mind on my repeat watches and see if I can pick it out. But I mean, at least through the first time, you did a good job of at least equalizing those out, or phasing it out.
This is what I feel like. This is the core value you get out of this type of filmmaking. Like when I did Fungicide, there were billions of mistakes, and I would think to move to the next level to do Sasquatch, I have to move that down to just millions of mistakes. And then for Tartarus, it's thousands, and then Zombies by Design, it's close to 1,000. Like every time you improve on something, and you're maturing in your process and your storytelling capabilities. But the key thing is no matter what you do, no matter how much icing you put on something, there still has to be value cake that exists, right? You still want to have the story that's concrete and characters that you're interested in. And, to your point you were saying earlier, like when we first see these characters, we don't really delve into saying, I'm this character and this is my backstory and this is why I feel pain. You want to understand that with them. Mm-hmm. You watch a movie and in 5 minutes, somebody's screaming and they're getting hurt. I'm not really interested. Why? Like maybe this person's a bad person. Maybe they caused the problem. I don't know. Like you have to bring me into be wanting to be interested in their story before you have anything happen to them. So I want that to come through here too.
Right. Yeah. Like it's hard to care right away when you barely know anything about them. But I just wanted to pivot a little bit to there's something that I noticed in your philosophy that you've talked about where and you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. And that there's basically an art in everything. Like nothing is like fully objectively like good or bad, black or white necessarily. There's always something that you can extract from like any objective thing. films in general as a prime example here. So with that, something to look for in everything. I mentioned earlier that like the performances of the film have definitely popped out as something that definitely surprised me and felt very spontaneously like artistic. Was there anything that like surprised you in a good way, kind of spontaneously?
It was well, first from the planning perspective, when I was casting, I was surprised at the skills that were being brought to the table. It was a huge step up from Fungicide, so I kind of had to, prepare myself a little bit better for how to manage actors on the set that were really serious and really trying to make an effort and really spending their time. Instead of apologizing for mistakes, they're there helping me. And then some of the actors like Sulan Sanchez, who played Tala in particular, and Juan Fernandez, they were just so above and beyond what I'd worked with before. They were just expressive, emotive, and ideas were just flowing forth from them. So it's a matter of just trying to say in some scenes, right? So if they had the freedom to see how they would respond to something, or even cut dialogue directly. Juan was really good at just trying a scene with dialogue and then just doing it without the scene and just letting his expressions carry it, which just was so amazing. And sometimes you just have to be in the mood and be open to let that happen. That's more difficult when you're stressed and you're handling props and trying to get a lot of shots done. But when those moments happen, when you feel it, it's just the synchronicity that's amazing. And the other point with that is that almost, there was a lot of laughing and enjoyment that would happen, but almost every take that was ruined from laughter was from me. Like, I would be laughing so much, not because I thought people were doing a bad job or I thought the film was bad, just that I was just so happy with this coming to fruition, and it was a realization of a dream, and I'm just so excited. And just some things that, it's like when you're play acting, right? You're really serious about it, and someone watching, they could be like, oh, you're just play acting, but it seems kind of cool and enjoyable in a fun way, right? Life's difficult, so it's wonderful to see people having this amount of fun.
Yeah, and it's like there are some good disruptions and bad disruptions during sets, rehearsals, shoots, and I feel like, to get disrupted by the writer-director laughing on set because what Juan Fernandez said was so funny, or something worked so well that we just had to take a quick 5 or something. That really, it does more than just make everyone have to do another take, but it kind of boosts the morale for that next take and the takes to follow.
There were many cases where if I didn't feel like the morale was there, I forced it. So there's some examples, like we were doing the scene where Juan's character throws up. And, we just had this hysterical, Mary kept making all these different mixes of fake vomit. And I would keep making these takes, and I'd say, Juan, I didn't get it. I missed the vomit. Do it again. And you're like, okay. He must have done that scene 8 times, and literally by the end, he was really ready to throw up. And we just kept laughing and teasing him, just trying. But he laughed it off, right? Like everybody can have a good time doing some of these things. The problem is as an actor, you don't know what it looks like on the other end. So a lot of people are thinking, well, how far is this going to evolve? Is this even going to be able to be released on DVD? People don't know, and until they saw the first trailer, that's when they were like, oh, crap, maybe I should have brought my A game. But I assure you everybody did anyway, so that worked out wonderfully.
That's great. Yeah, vomiting 8 times in a row can't be fun, whether it's real or fake.
Yeah.
Now, just to go a little bit more broad, really, there's something about Bigfoot, Sasquatch, what have you, that I think it's fascinating because it brings out something different in everyone. Like when they are attracted to that legend, that story, that just this whole thing, right? So it's almost like a personality test or a Rorschach test where you see Bigfoot, but then it brings out all these other hidden interests in you. There's a reason why you are so attracted to monster movies. It may not just be because of the aesthetics, the makeup and the effects and the time put into the craft of those for the films. It could also be something that draws you on a literal a written aspect, or a thematic aspect, maybe philosophical. Is there anything about like Bigfoot or Sasquatch that you would say attracts you to that?
It would be a waste of money to pay a psychiatrist to figure out if my interest in Bigfoot has any deep-seated roots in my psychology of being 5 years old, cowering behind my dad's legs and saying, well, you had an irrational fear of the woods, and this was just a way to cement that. I mean, that's a waste of time, because I could just tell you from the rudimentary TV shows that were on in the 70s when I was young that would talk about Bigfoot, it would just frighten me. And it really made me afraid of the woods. And we would frequently go to a cabin in the woods, and I would be deathly afraid at night. It would be thrilling to go out, like riding around on my bike or something like that and enjoy it. And it didn't stop me from doing anything, but it was this wonderful fear that I didn't mind keeping alive. It would enjoyed it being something that was there. I think that just liking horror as a genre is just something that I'm just interested in. It's fascinating. I mean, I don't have a million collections of props, and it's not like I'm making burnt candle offerings to some, ancient Mayan demigod because it's like something I truly believe in. It's just a fun thrill, and I think I found that in so many cases, horror runs this gamut of truly frightening and just horrific in its ideas, or truly frightening in what it's displaying in terms of humanity, or somewhat comedic, or it's representative of something in life, like I was mentioning about Romero, Dawn of the Dead, and commercialism. But those are horror films that involve something that's supernatural, or something from another realm, another universe, or a creature that's, Bigfoot. It's not going to exist. It's just a fantastic non-reality. It's escapism. But I will tell you this much: I don't like horror films where there's someone who has a mental issue, or someone who is a real human being committing murderous acts. Like, to me, that's just ultra violent. Those just don't appeal to me. I'm not saying they're bad films. It's just that I just don't care for them. And then the closest I got to that was Malevolent Ascent, which did have a bit of bizarreness, and there was a question of whether there was a reality to that film in the first place. So that kind of skirted that edge, but that's the closest I would come to anything with reality in it. So to me, like, I want to be taken away. I don't want to watch something about someone who's going on a raving lunatic attack. Maybe the exception would be maybe like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is loosely based on Ed Gein. So maybe that's as close as I would get, because even though the subject matter was real, it's still a fictional story. But you get what I'm saying, right? Like, it's still an escapist piece, but I don't think that there's any value in trying to say, like, my video library is really largely between science fiction, horror, and documentaries.
Right. Yeah, there's something about like when you have that layer of assumed reality, like in the basis of Suburban Sasquatch, there's a small town, there's that assumption that everyone lives as normally as they would want to in a copy of what we know as reality, but then the Sasquatch element kind of comes on top of that and is like this surprising otherworldly element to it, where then their concept of reality is like shattered or warped in a way, except for the police chief, who, like, actually I won't spoil that. So but like everyone has like their own different expectations in the film, and as a viewer you come into that kind of on the same ground as reality, but then there's that suspension of disbelief that it kind of varies with different films, especially horror, because like it can either be the exact same level of reality, or just like completely skyrocketing off.
And what fascinated me is when I wrote the film, I had a sheet where I was listing out all of Bigfoot's known capabilities, right? Like, people will take pictures of him and they're blurry, and he seems to just not be there anymore. So I kept translating these into, well, he must have some kind of ethereal power where he can blur camera images, and that was in the original script, and he can appear and disappear. So he had to have some kind of mystical power that he drew from, and that allowed him to be able to combat whatever he was facing. But from a reality perspective, what always amazed me was people who would have these very close encounters, and they would absolutely, without a doubt, say that there was this huge cryptid that was bear-like, standing on its hind legs, completely upright, and had a humanoid in appearance. So it wasn't to be mistaken. And a lot of these were credible people in the sense that they knew what a bear on its hind legs looked like. They could tell by the arch in the back. And it was fascinating to me that there are people that had these experiences. So in the film, I wanted to make sure that I gave a lot of weight towards people who would deny it, yet people who had firsthand encounters, and to be able to show that, like you were saying, like that suspension of disbelief couldn't be so far off where everybody was denying it, but enough people were experiencing it and willing to take action based on their beliefs.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing you did so well with Suburban Sasquatch was, if you're watching a Bigfoot movie, you probably already know about all like the claims and the sightings and various different, things of people who go out and like intentionally hunt for a Bigfoot or the Bigfoot, like however they put it. But you see that in this film, the characters are both actively doing that and passively doing that. But you also, it doesn't have to be spelled out like why they're doing it, instead of like just kind of identifying with the people who just won't give that that Sasquatch or bear theory even in the film like any time of day. Like they just can't entertain the notion it has to be a serial killer because like there's no bears here, Sasquatch isn't real, it doesn't exist. Like it has to be this only explanation that has no evidence whatsoever.
And what always concerned me about films up to that point, or at least even a lot of films today, horror films, you have the situation where group of people A goes to location B, which may or may not have odd situation C. So already when the film starts, I'm like, well, where you're going to, like, I'm analytical, you're going to this area, you're going to potentially encounter something that's taking a lot of the fun out of it. So to me, I wanted to make sure that this was Bigfoot coming into your neighborhood. This is the audience being able to understand that I am not immune from this because I'm not in the Pacific Northwest. I now go out and research and find Bigfoot's been sighted in almost every single state in the United States and worldwide, that Bigfoot is an unknown element and actually must have a purpose beyond just existing. And with the way that we've been treating our environment and nature, it's obvious that it's going to be some point where she's getting tired of it, and it's going to change from I'm a passive creature that hides to I'm going to take action.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Bigfoot, the first environmentalist.
Exactly. Yeah, and you know what? I would say now is the time. If there is any out there, like please come out and start taking action. Since you mentioned the Pacific Northwest, which there have been there's quite a bit of lore, about Sasquatch and the Bigfoot and everything. I happen to reside in Seattle in the Pacific Northwest, so sometimes you get people who go out to the Olympic Peninsula and like they want to go hiking and like on the back burner, I'm gonna take my camera and see if I can find any weird shit out there. But I happen to be a pretty well-known patron over at the largest video rental store, which is Scarecrow Video. And they have recently just put up a website called OperationBigfoot.com. This is a project where they set up a giant shelf, and it's shaped like a giant foot. So they put all their Bigfoot Sasquatch movies in there, and they're actively looking for sponsored films. I checked with some of the curators there, and they do have your DVD copy of Suburban Sasquatch, but when I let them know that Wild Eye was going to be putting out a Blu-ray of it, I don't think they knew about it. So I guess this might just be like an open foster to like just ask it if you would consider sponsoring a copy of Suburban Sasquatch for the big Operation
definitely.
Bigfoot.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to. Yeah, I'll have to check that out or hook me up, and I would definitely reach out to them.
Okay.
Because obviously that's one of the central home places that Bigfoot's been seen quite a lot, so why not get in his home territory?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad to see that you're operating a video rental store. That's wonderful. I'm glad that they have such a wonderful feel for him. You miss that when you're scrolling through a streaming service. You miss that tactile sense of being able to enjoy about a new release and seeing the actual covers and put your hands on them.
And like that cover sensation, like when you pick it up off the shelf, I'm very fortunate to still get that feeling. I really wish that it could come back for everyone, really. But I get why it's not viable, and we're moving through a different era, sadly. But
Yeah.
you know, we can still like keep this alive. I mean, I have quite a few, physical media selections behind me. Like one of my favorite things to do is just amass all these and just bring in someone who's like never seen or heard of any of this stuff before. Just let them pick it up and ask me what this movie is, and sometimes I'll tell them, sometimes I won't, and I'll just put the movie on. So
Yeah, see, I am the same way. I have such a huge collection. I keep buying films, and at some point, Mary's going to say we just got way too many films there. Like, but I try to. I really love getting collector's editions of things as well, like with the special artwork and the harder to find ones. But I just love having that physical copy. You can watch it whenever you want and enjoy that. It's part of your enjoyment and sensation. And there's a lot of wonderful films out there, and like anything, things come back in style. So, there'll be a time where we move away from streaming and people want to retain a physical copy because they're going to want that sense of ownership, and they feel like they have a piece of history and it's something they could pass on or enjoy and share with others.
right, yeah, and there's that feeling of permanence in a way, and like I know not everything is essentially permanent, but like neither is your life really. So like I don't know, is this Blu-ray gonna outlast you or what? I mean, I feel like it's worth putting down. It's not like a gamble or anything. You just want to have it with
You're
you.
asking me if this Blu-ray is going to outlive me at the rate I'm
Oh,
drinking
no.
wine. It probably will. I'll tell you.
Yeah.
So
Well,
you're absolutely right. You're right. Media is going to change in the format in which we preserve, and this is a relatively new phenomenon. In the '70s, the concept of being able to have something like that was just unknown. So in the late '80s, when I was able to record, like on VHS and be able to wow, I've got a copy of something. Well, then with the advent of buying the VHS or then buying them on DVD, it was like, man, I'm hoarding these things. When am I ever going to be able to get a Japanese anime film again? So the ability has grown to collect them. But right, the market might be shrinking. It may be difficult to get them now, but I think they will come back in time. But I absolutely won't go without buying. I love having my copies, like little and you're right. When you share with a friend and they actually open the cover and they see the artwork, it's very much when you're in an art gallery. So the Mona Lisa is a wonderful painting, but it's not worth it. And you're in the Louvre and you're standing 5-10 feet away from it. You cannot appreciate the sfumato and the technique that Da Vinci did. You can't get up close to really study it. You go to the Uffizi or you get out the other paintings in the Louvre, you can actually get up close. You really get to see the strokes. You see the depth and the thickness. That you really get to appreciate the art and how it was done.
yeah, and like sometimes you get other sensations too. Like I mean, in museums, I mean, you can't touch the paintings or sculptures, and I understand why. That makes complete sense. But sometimes, like, you get that smell of the oils or the acrylics or whatever materials were used, and it helps kick in some other level of appreciation, I think. And like, I mean, that kind of goes for movies as well. Like, if you have like this first edition VHS of, say, some shot on video movie, which might be getting a restoration at some point in the future. Who knows? Like you open that clamshell, you get the old analog tape smell. Like if you know it, if you know, you know. If you don't, I would advise fixing that if you can. But
hey, that's why people love the new car smell. You buy a new car and like, oh, I hope this lasts. It's something you make an association with, right? Like. Our olfactory sense is closely associated with memory, probably the biggest and the most closest relation to memory that we have. So you smell cut grass, it brings back a million memories of summertime, right? It's just so closely linked with those synaptic responses. So in the same way, oh man, this brings back memories of this film when I got it and the sense of when I first watched it.
Yeah, that's why I still have my childhood copies of your George Lucas, Steven Spielberg movies. If anything, just to have them there. But I guess that's enough of a tangent there for nostalgic physical media and everything. But I don't want to run too much at a time because I don't have a Zoom Pro account. So
No worries.
But I do want to thank you so much for stopping by, Dave, and talking about Suburban Sasquatch and like its hopeful like massive resurgence. I really want this to be something that kicks up even more interest for your sequels, and it sounds like you have a great plan for it, and I know you want to keep that close to the chest. I'll respect that. But just as a reminder, the Blu-ray is available now. Came out on August 9th from Visual Vengeance, written and directed here by Dave Wascavage. And this is Celluloid Consomme, telling you to support true independent film.
Hey, thank you so much. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too, Dave. Thanks.
Thank you.